Blood trickled from Amara Cole's lip as Judge Robert Whitfield smirked from his bench. "Clear my courtroom of this distraction," he ordered. The deputies approached, but Amara calmly opened her federal credentials. "Operation Clean Courts begins now," she whispered, pressing record. "Before we dive into this shocking story of corruption and racial injustice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed discrimination in our justice system, and subscribe to join our community, fighting for truth and accountability. Now, let's uncover how Amara's calm demeanor hides a storm about to engulf Judge Whitfield's corrupt empire. The Millbrook County Courthouse stood like a gleaming monument to justice, its white columns and polished marble steps projecting an aura of fairness and impartiality that Amara Cole knew was nothing but a facade. At 34, Amara had become one of the Justice Department's most effective investigators within the Civil Rights Division, known for her methodical approach and unshakable composure. Today, as she climbed those pristine steps in her perfectly tailored navy suit, she wasn't just another black woman entering a southern courthouse. She was the beginning of an earthquake that would shake Millbrook, Alabama, to its core. The whispers had reached Washington months ago. Judge Robert Whitfield, 62, with his silver hair and Georgetown law degree, had been dispensing justice with two entirely different scales. For white defendants, his sentences were lenient, often reduced to probation or community service. For black defendants, the same crimes brought maximum sentences, excessive bail, and denied appeals. Amara settled into the back row of Courtroom 3, her leather notebook open, her pen moving steadily as she documented every detail of the morning's proceedings. Case after case confirmed the pattern. 22 months for a white college student, caught with cocaine versus 6 years for a black man with marijuana. Probation for a white businessman's tax fraud versus prison for a black woman's welfare application error. Amara's face remained impassive, but her stomach churned with each ruling. By mid-morning, Judge Whitfield had noticed her. His eyes kept drifting to the back row, to the elegant black woman whose pen never stopped moving. During a recess, he dispatched a court officer to her side. "Judge Whitfield would like to know your business here," the young officer said, his hand resting casually on his holster. Amara smiled politely. "I'm observing proceedings for a legal education program. Public courtroom. Public proceedings." She had decided weeks ago not to reveal her federal credentials until absolutely necessary. The element of surprise would be crucial. The officer retreated, but Amara could feel Judge Whitfield's gaze intensifying, his suspicion growing with each note she took. When court resumed, the tension in the room had shifted. Judge Whitfield rushed through 3 cases, then suddenly pointed his gavel directly at Amara. "You! Approach the bench." The courtroom fell silent as Amara walked forward, her steps unhurried, dignified. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear and professional, "what organization did you say you represented?" Judge Whitfield demanded, his southern drawl thickening with irritation. "I didn't specify an organization, Your Honor. I'm here observing as a legal professional." Judge Whitfield's face reddened slightly. "We don't appreciate uninvited scrutiny. In my courtroom. Where did you get your law degree, if you have one?" The implied insult hung in the air. "Howard University, Your Honor. Class of 2013. "Ah." Judge Whitfield's lips curled. "One of those affirmative action schools. I suppose they had to meet their quota somehow." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Amara's expression remained neutral, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "My credentials are in order, Your Honor, as is my right to observe these proceedings." Judge Whitfield's gavel came down hard. "I find your presence disruptive. Officers, remove this woman from my courtroom immediately and confiscate whatever notes she's been taking." 2 deputies moved toward Amara, who stood her ground. "Your Honor, this is a public proceeding. Removing me would constitute—" "Contempt!" Judge Whitfield bellowed. "One more word, and you'll spend the night in county jail. Now get out of my courtroom before I have you dragged out." Amara allowed herself to be escorted out, maintaining her dignity even as whispers and stares followed her exit. Outside, she took a deep breath of the humid Alabama air, straightened her jacket, and walked purposefully to her rental car. 20 minutes later, she swiped her keycard into room 12 at the Oakwood extended stay on the outskirts of town. Inside, two other agents looked up from their laptops. "So," said Darius Taylor, the team's data analyst, his 6'4" frame hunched over a table covered with spreadsheets. "How's the Honorable Judge Whitfield in person?" "Every bit the racist we suspected," Amara replied, setting her recorder on the table. "And now we have his contempt for Howard University and quota reference on tape." Keisha Washington, their undercover specialist, whistled. "That's going to play well in the report." Amara removed her jacket, rolled up her sleeves, and joined them at the evidence board they'd constructed. Photos of Judge Whitfield, his associates, and a web of connections filled the wall. "We've been tracking his cases for months," Amara explained, "but today confirms it's not just statistical anomalies. He's openly hostile to black professionals, not just defendants." "The Justice Department has had complaints about Whitfield for years," Darius noted, pulling up a digital timeline. "Civil rights violations, evidence suppression, bribery allegations, but he's got powerful friends." "Which is why we're here," Amara said. "The Special Task Force wanted someone who could handle pressure without breaking. This isn't my first racist judge." What she didn't say, what wasn't in her official file, was how personal this mission was. 20 years ago, in this same county, her father Marcus Cole had been sentenced to 15 years by a young Judge Whitfield for a robbery he didn't commit. Marcus died in prison 5 years into his sentence after being denied medical care for her treatable infection. Amara had been 14. She never told her supervisors that Millbrook wasn't just another assignment. It was a homecoming. "We need to be careful," Keisha warned, tapping a photo of State Senator George Preston. "Whitfield's brother-in-law sits on the Judiciary Oversight Committee. One call from him could shut us down. Then we build a case so solid they can't ignore it," Amara replied, pinning a new photo to the board. "Judge Whitfield has made one critical mistake." "What's that?" Darius asked. "He thinks I'm leaving town," Amara said, a rare smile crossing her face. "But I'll be back in his courtroom tomorrow, and the next day, and I'll keep coming back until we have everything we need." As night fell over Millbrook, Amara stood at her hotel window, looking toward the lights of downtown where Judge Whitfield was likely enjoying dinner at his exclusive country club. "This time," she whispered to herself, "the scales will finally balance." The morning sun cast long shadows across Millbrook as Amara met with her expanded team in their secure hotel suite. 2 new faces joined the operation. Darius Taylor, 38, a former MIT mathematician who could find patterns in chaos, and Keisha Washington, 41, a veteran undercover specialist with 15 successful operations against corrupt officials. "Our first priority," Amara explained, spreading case files across the table, "is documenting the racial disparity in sentencing. Darius, what have you found?" Darius adjusted his glasses and pulled up a detailed spreadsheet on his laptop. "It's worse than we thought. Over the past 5 years, Judge Whitfield has sentenced black defendants to an average of 42% longer prison terms than white defendants for identical crimes. Drug possession, petty theft, traffic violations, the pattern is consistent. Across all categories," Keisha whistled. "That's not subtle." "He doesn't think he needs to be subtle," Amara replied. "Millbrook County is 70% white, and Whitfield has been on the bench for 22 years. He's untouchable in his mind." Darius swiped to another screen. "There's more. I've been tracking financial records, and there are irregularities. Specifically offshore deposits to an account in the Cayman Islands that correlate with certain case dismissals." "Which cases?" Amara asked, leaning forward. "Primarily white-collar crimes, securities fraud, tax evasion, real estate scams, all involving prominent white businessmen in the county, all mysteriously dismissed or reduced to nominal fines despite substantial evidence." Amara nodded. "So we're looking at both racial bias and financial corruption. We need community perspectives. Keisha, can you begin approaching families affected by his rulings?" "Already started," Keisha said. "I've set up meetings with 12 families under the cover of being a documentary filmmaker. First interviews are this afternoon." "Good. I'll continue courthouse observation. We need to establish a pattern of behavior that no one can dismiss as coincidental. The next 3 days brought a flood of heartbreaking stories from black residents of Millbrook County. A 19-year-old sentenced to 8 years for possessing 2 ounces of marijuana, while the white mayor's son received probation for cocaine. Distribution. A black schoolteacher who lost her career after Judge Whitfield refused to expunge a 20-year-old shoplifting charge, while approving expungement for a white lawyer with a DUI. Family after family shared how Judge Whitfield's courtroom had become a revolving door to prison for Millbrook's black community. On the 4th day, while reviewing court records in the county clerk's office, Amara noticed a young woman watching her from behind a filing cabinet. The woman, petite, nervous, with short braided hair, approached cautiously. "You're the one Judge Whitfield had removed last week," she whispered. Amara nodded but remained silent, assessing. "I'm Maya Jenkins, assistant court clerk." She glanced around to ensure no one was listening. "What you're looking for? Some records aren't in the public files." "What kind of records?" Amara asked quietly. Maya fidgeted with her employee badge. "Sealed cases, private meetings, things that happen after hours in his chambers." She slipped Amara a folded sticky note. "I can't talk here, but I want to help." Before Amara could respond, Maya hurried away as heavy footsteps approached. Well, our visitor is still in town." Sheriff Thomas Calloway, 6 feet of Southern authority topped with a cowboy hat, loomed over Amara's table. His hand rested casually on his holstered weapon. "Courthouse records are public," Amara stated calmly, gathering her materials. "Not when you're accessing them under false pretenses," Calloway drawled. "Judge Whitfield has concerns about potential identity theft and unauthorized access. I'm going to need to see what you've been copying." "No, you don't," Amara replied, standing to her full height. "And if you attempt to confiscate my materials without a warrant, I'll add harassment to the list of concerns I'm documenting." "Sheriff," Calloway's eyes narrowed. "This is my county, Miss Cole, Amara Cole, and this is my business card." She handed him a generic card identifying her as a legal consultant, true if incomplete. "I'd advise against further interference with lawful research." The sheriff's face darkened as he pocketed her card. "Millbrook has ways of dealing with troublemakers, Miss Cole, especially ones who don't know their place." The threat hung in the air as he walked away. That evening, Amara discovered several key files she had flagged earlier in the week had vanished from the digital archive, expunged as if they never existed. More disturbing was the black sedan that followed her, from the courthouse to a local restaurant, then back to her hotel. When she entered her room, Darius and Keisha looked up with concern. "We've got problems," Amara announced. "Someone's tampering with evidence, and I'm being followed." Keisha moved to the window, checking the parking lot with practiced eyes. "Black Chevy Impala, 2 occupants, they're taking photos." "We've got bigger issues," Darius said, turning his laptop toward her. "I've been running facial recognition on Judge Whitfield's social media. Look who keeps appearing at his private gatherings." The screen showed Whitfield alongside Sheriff Calloway, 3 county commissioners, and the regional bank president at various fundraisers and hunting trips. "It's a network," Amara murmured. "How far does it extend?" "At least to the state level," Darius confirmed. "Senator Preston attends these same events, and he controls judicial appointments for this circuit." A knock at the door silenced the room. Keisha motioned for them to stay quiet as she approached with her hand inside her jacket. She checked the peephole, then relaxed slightly. "Room service. We didn't order anything." Amara approached and called through the door. "We didn't. Request room service." "Complimentary, ma'am," came the reply, "for our extended stay guests." Keisha carefully opened the door. A young hotel employee wheeled in a covered tray, looking nervous. After he left, they inspected the delivery, a bottle of wine and a handwritten note that simply read, "Leave Millbrook now if you want to stay healthy." The next morning, Maya Jenkins called the burner number Amara had given her. "Judge Whitfield has called an emergency meeting tonight, 8 p.m. at his hunting lodge outside town. The mayor and sheriff will be there." "How do you know this?" Amara asked. "I process his calendar adjustments. This wasn't on the official schedule. He dictated the invitation personally and asked me to make the calls myself." Amara thanked her and hung up. We need surveillance on that lodge, she told her team. Whatever has Whitfield spooked enough to call a midnight meeting, we need to hear it. The Whispering Pines hunting lodge stood isolated among towering Alabama oaks, its rustic exterior concealing modern luxury within. Judge Whitfield's private retreat hosted only the county's most powerful men. Women were permitted solely as servers, never as guests. Amara's team faced their most challenging infiltration yet: how to breach this fortress of good old boy privilege. Traditional surveillance won't work, Keisha explained, examining satellite images of the property. No nearby structures for directional mics, too much security for vehicle approaches. Darius scratched his chin thoughtfully. What about maintenance? A place that size must need regular upkeep. 20 minutes and several phone calls later, they had their answer. Cleaning service comes tomorrow morning, Keisha announced triumphantly. Judge likes his lodge spotless after these gatherings. And guess who just got hired by Millbrook Elite Cleaning Services? She grinned, holding up a freshly printed employee badge with her photo. Apparently, they're desperate for workers willing to clean up after these gentlemen. The next morning, Keisha entered the lodge disguised as a cleaner. While polishing Judge Whitfield's private office, she strategically placed 3 state-of-the-art listening devices, one beneath his desk, another inside an air vent, and the third within a trophy base mounted on the wall. That evening, huddled in their hotel room, Amara, Darius, and Keisha listened as Judge Whitfield's meeting unfolded in crystal-clear audio. "Gentlemen," Whitfield's distinctive drawl came through the speakers, "we have a situation that requires immediate attention. Someone is investigating our judicial arrangements." "That black woman from your courtroom?" Sheriff Calloway asked. "The very same. My contacts at the courthouse in Birmingham checked her out. She's been asking questions about our sentencing patterns, specifically regarding racial disparities." "So what?" Mayor Franklin's voice replied. "We've handled nosy reporters and ACLU types before. This feels different," Whitfield insisted. "She's methodical, professional, and she's not backing down despite Thomas's warning." A new voice joined in. Bradley Wilson, the county's largest real estate developer. "Is this going to affect our Riverview project? Because I've already paid the first installment of consulting fees." The euphemism wasn't lost on Amara's team. Consulting fees as their code for bribes. "Everything proceeds as planned," Whitfield assured him. "The zoning board will approve the changes next week, and any appeals will come to my court." "What about the holdouts?" Wilson asked. "The Williams family still won't sell, and that entire block of properties is crucial for Phase 2. "Leave the Williams situation to me," Sheriff Calloway interjected. "I've got deputies watching their place. One wrong move, and we'll find something to charge them with. They'll be motivated sellers once they're facing legal troubles." Judge Whitfield's voice lowered conspiratorially. "This is precisely why our neighborhood preservation initiative is so important, gentlemen. We must maintain the proper demographic balance in Millbrook, the right kind of growth." "Damn straight," another voice agreed. "My daddy didn't build this town so it could turn into Birmingham or Atlanta. Some folks just don't understand where they belong." Amara's hand tightened around her pen as she took notes. The Neighborhood Preservation Initiative was clearly their coded language for keeping black residents contained to certain areas of Millbrook through selective law enforcement and judicial manipulation. "We have the system working perfectly," Whitfield continued. "Sheriff Calloway ensures the right people get arrested, the prosecutors know which cases to push hard on, and I ensure the sentencing maintains our community standards." The recording continued for another hour, detailing specific cases, bribes, and targeted harassment of black business owners and homeowners who stood in the way of their development plans. When it finally ended, Amara sat back, her face grim but satisfied. "We've got them," she said quietly. "Conspiracy, corruption, civil rights violations, abuse of power, all on tape." "This is explosive," Darius agreed, already backing up the recording to multiple secure servers. "Their entire power structure is built on racial discrimination and bribery." "We should move quickly," Keisha advised. "Once we process this evidence—" A sharp knock interrupted her. Amara approached the door cautiously. "Who is it?" "Sheriff's Department. "Open up, Miss Cole." Amara signaled her team to secure their equipment as she cracked the door open. Sheriff Calloway stood flanked by 2 deputies. "Good evening, Sheriff. How can I help you?" "Step outside, please," he demanded, his hand resting on his holster. "What's this about?" "You were observed speeding on County Road 16 earlier today, 47 in a 35 zone." Amara hadn't driven anywhere near County Road 16. "I think there's been a mistake." "No mistake," Calloway smiled coldly. "Turn around, hands behind your back." "For an alleged traffic violation? I don't think so." "Resisting an officer now too? That's a shame." The confrontation continued until Amara reluctantly agreed to accompany them to the station, whispering to Keisha to contact their Justice Department liaison. At the sheriff's station, deputies searched her car thoroughly, claiming they smelled marijuana, another fabrication. They found nothing, but the message was clear. They were watching and would manufacture charges if necessary. The next day, the Millbrook Monitor published a front-page story, "Outside Agitator Disrupts Local Courts." The article quoted anonymous sources claiming Amara was a radical activist with ties to extremist groups, investigating rural southern communities to file frivolous discrimination lawsuits. Darius discovered more troubling news. Judge Whitfield's brother-in-law, Senator Preston, sits on the Oversight Committee for the Justice Department's regional operations. He could potentially interfere with our investigation. "We need to accelerate our timeline," Amara decided. "Contact everyone. We've interviewed. We need signed statements immediately before they're intimidated into silence." But the pressure campaign had already begun. 3 families cancelled their follow-up interviews, citing concerns about community backlash. Business owners who had spoken with Keisha suddenly claimed they had nothing to share. The walls were closing in. Then came the biggest blow. "Director Harrison is ordering us to suspend the investigation," Amara announced after a tense phone call with headquarters. "Senator Preston has raised concerns about federal overreach and harassment of state judicial officials." "They can't just shut us down," Keisha protested. "We have evidence of criminal activity." "Harrison claims it's temporary, just go until the proper approvals come through. But we all know what happens to temporarily suspended investigations." Amara paced the room, thinking. "We have 72 hours before the official suspension takes effect. Let's use them." That night, a silver lining emerged from their darkening situation. Maya Jenkins called, her voice trembling with fear. "They arrested Bethany Collins today, a friend of mine who works at the county records office. They're saying she stole documents, but it's because she was helping me look for the sealed case files." "Where are they holding her?" Amara asked urgently. "County jail." Judge Whitfield personally denied her bail, calling her a flight risk even though she's lived here her whole life. "Amara, I'm scared. They know someone's helping you." "Stay calm, Maya. We'll protect you." After hanging up, Amara turned to her team. "We're running out of time. Darius, secure all our evidence on encrypted servers. Keisha, we need extraction plans for our witnesses, especially Maya." As they worked through the night, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial about Judge Whitfield's operation. Why was he so confident? What protection did he have that made him believe he was untouchable? Have you ever witnessed corruption in your community's justice system? Comment number 1 if you believe judges should face stricter oversight, or number 2 if you think the current systems work well. Like this video if you're rooting for Amara to bring down this corrupt network. Subscribe to see how she fights back against these powerful enemies who control everything from the police to the media. Will Amara find a way to protect Maya and free Bethany before Judge Whitfield's corruption destroys more lives? What would you do if you were in Amara's position, facing a system rigged against justice? The fluorescent lights of Millbrook County Jail cast a sickly glow over the visitors' area as Amara sat waiting for Bethany Collins. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and desperation, a scent Amara had encountered in too many correctional facilities across the country. When guards finally brought Bethany in, Amara was shocked by her appearance, eyes puffy from crying, hair disheveled, a visible bruise darkening on her forearm. "I'm Amara Cole," she said quietly. "Maya sent me." Bethany glanced nervously at the guard standing nearby. "I don't know any, Maya," she responded loudly, then leaned forward, lowering her voice to a whisper. "They're listening to everything." Under the pretense of handing Bethany a tissue, Amara slipped her a small piece of paper with her phone number. Bethany took it, then subtly passed something back, a plastic key card with the court building's logo. "His private study," Bethany whispered, her lips barely moving. "Behind the landscape painting. Combination is his anniversary. 6/22. Amara nodded almost imperceptibly, then continued their conversation at normal volume, discussing Bethany's case as if she were a court-appointed attorney. When the visit ended, Amara returned to their hotel where tension had been building among the team. "This is getting too dangerous," Elena argued, as Amara recounted her jail visit. "Breaking into a judge's private study? That's not just career. Suicide, it's actual breaking and entering." "I agree," Darius added. "We're federal investigators, not cat burglars. Any evidence obtained would be inadmissible anyway." Amara slammed her hand on the table. "You think I don't know that? We're not talking about normal procedures anymore. They're manufacturing charges, intimidating witnesses, and obstructing a federal investigation. They just threw an innocent woman in jail." "It feels personal for you," Keisha observed carefully. "Is there something you haven't told us about this case?" The room fell silent. Amara walked to the window, staring out at the Millbrook skyline for a long moment before responding. "Judge Robert Whitfield sentenced my father to 15 years for armed robbery in 2004. He didn't do it. The real perpetrator confessed 3 years later, but Whitfield refused to reopen the case, claiming the confession was coerced." Her voice remained steady, professional, but her colleagues could hear the underlying pain. "My father died in prison. Pneumonia that went untreated because the prison doctor was understaffed and ignored his symptoms. I was 14. Darius and Keisha exchanged glances. "You should have disclosed this conflict of interest," Darius said gently. "The department would have assigned someone else, and they would have failed, just like the 3 previous investigations into Whitfield," Amara replied. "No one else has my motivation to see this through, no matter what it takes." After hours of debate, they reached a compromise. They wouldn't break into Judge Whitfield's private residence, but they would use a more legitimate approach, the annual Millbrook Justice Foundation Gala, held at Whitfield's mansion the following evening. Keisha had discovered that catering staff were still being hired, creating an opportunity for surveillance without illegal entry. The night of the gala arrived, and both Amara and Keisha infiltrated the event. Keisha as a server, and Amara as investment banker Angela Mercer, using credentials created by Darius that would withstand cursory background checks. Judge Whitfield's plantation-style mansion buzzed with Millbrook's elite. Politicians, business owners, and law enforcement, mingling over champagne and southern canapes. Amara navigated the crowd with practiced ease, engaging in meaningless small talk while mapping the house's layout. When Judge Whitfield became engrossed in conversation with the mayor, she slipped away down a hallway marked "Private." The judge's study exuded old-money Southern privilege, leather-bound law books, hunting trophies, and oil paintings of stern-looking ancestors. Amara quickly located the landscape painting Bethany had mentioned, a romanticized depiction of Millbrook in the 19th century. Behind it, just as promised, was a wall safe. She entered the combination, 6/22. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside lay several folders labeled with case numbers rather than names. Working quickly, Amara photographed each page with a miniature camera disguised as a lipstick tube. The documents revealed a sophisticated system for case allocation, ensuring certain defendants appeared before Judge Whitfield rather than the county's other judges. Cases involving black defendants, especially those with significant assets that could be seized through conviction, were specifically routed to Whitfield's courtroom. As she photographed the final document, Amara heard footsteps approaching. She quickly returned the files, closed the safe, and straightened the painting. Looking around desperately, she grabbed a book from the shelf and pretended to be browsing just as the door opened. "The library's downstairs," said a woman's cool voice. Catherine Whitfield, the judge's wife, stood in the doorway, her expression suspicious. "This is my husband's private study." Amara smiled apologetically. "I'm so sorry. I was looking for a bathroom and got turned around. Your home is just so impressive." Catherine's eyes narrowed. "The bathrooms are clearly marked. Who did you say you were with?" "Angela Mercer, Southeastern Investment Group," Amara replied smoothly. "Judge Whitfield and I were discussing potential funding for the courthouse renovation project." "How interesting. My husband hasn't mentioned any renovation project to me." The tension was broken by a server appearing, Keisha offering champagne. "Mrs. Whitfield, the mayor is asking for you in the main hall." Catherine hesitated, then nodded. "I'll be right there." To Amara, she added, "I'll have someone show you to the bathroom, Miss Mercer, and then perhaps back to the main party where you belong." As Catherine left, Keisha whispered, "We need to go now." They rejoined the party briefly to avoid suspicion, then made their excuses and left. Back at the hotel, Amara downloaded the photos onto Darius's secure laptop. "My God," he breathed as they scrolled through the evidence. "It's not just bias, it's a complete rigging of the judicial system." One file in particular caught Amara's attention, a list of case numbers with red stars beside them. She recognized one immediately, CR 2004-1382, her father's case number. "He knew," she whispered. "All this time, he knew exactly what he was doing." According to Whitfield's private notes, Marcus Cole's case had been specially selected because of the valuable property he owned near what was now being developed as Millbrook's revitalized downtown. Property that had been seized and sold at auction after his conviction. As they prepared to leave, Amara received a text from an unknown number. "They know you were in the study. Get out now." But it was too late. As they packed their equipment, a knock came at the door. Darius checked the peephole and froze. "It's Whitfield." Amara straightened her jacket and opened the door with confident calm. Judge Robert Whitfield stood in the hallway, flanked by Sheriff Calloway. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, his tuxedo still immaculate from the gala. "Miss Cole," he said, his southern accent thickening with false cordiality. "Or should I say, Miss Mercer, I never forget a face, especially one that's been causing me so much trouble." "Judge Whitfield," Amara replied coolly, maintaining her composure despite the hammering of her heart. "This is an unexpected visit." The judge's smile never reached his eyes. "Not as unexpected as discovering a federal investigator impersonating a guest at my private residence. That's criminal trespass, Miss Cole, a serious offense in Millbrook County." Sheriff Calloway grinned, clearly enjoying the moment. "We could arrest you right now." "You could try," Amara responded, subtly shifting, to ensure they couldn't see past her, into the room where Darius and Keisha were securing their evidence. "But that would make for interesting headlines. Federal civil rights investigator arrested while investigating judicial corruption. I'm sure Washington would take notice." Judge Whitfield's smile faded. "Speaking of Washington, I had a fascinating conversation with Senator Preston this evening. Imagine my surprise when he mentioned an unauthorized Justice Department investigation into my courtroom. Apparently there was never any official approval for your little project." Amara felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Her suspicions were confirmed. Someone at Justice had leaked their operation to Preston. "Is that why you're here? To tell me you've complained to my bosses?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "I'm here as a courtesy," Whitfield replied. "By tomorrow morning, your supervisor, Director Harrison, I believe, will be issuing a formal termination of this investigation on grounds of procedural violations and investigator misconduct. You'll be recalled to Washington immediately for disciplinary review." He leaned closer, dropping his friendly facade. "Go home, Miss Cole, before you suffer the same unfortunate fate as your father." The threat hung in the air between them. "You remember him," Whitfield continued, watching her reaction closely. "Marcus Cole, convicted armed robber, died in prison as I recall. Such a tragedy." Amara's face remained impassive through sheer force of will. "Thank you for the warning. Judge Whitfield, is there anything else?" Whitfield stepped back. Sheriff Calloway will escort you and your team to the county line in the morning. I suggest you be packed and ready by 8 a.m. After they left, Amara closed the door and leaned against it, finally allowing her hands to shake. They know everything, she said hoarsely. Whitfield has connections inside justice. He knows who I am, why I'm here, everything. We need to contact Director Chen, Darius urged, referring to their direct supervisor in Washington. If Harrison is compromised, we can't trust anyone right now, Amara cut him off, not until we know how far this goes. That night, they secured their evidence on encrypted drives and prepared contingency plans. Morning brought confirmation of Whitfield's warning, an official email from Director Harrison ordering their immediate return to Washington and the suspension of all investigative activities. This is a temporary measure pending review of certain procedural concerns, the email concluded, but they all knew what it really meant. Their case was being buried. Amara made a difficult decision. You two need to return to Washington with copies of everything we've gathered. I'm staying. That's career suicide, Keisha protested. Harrison will fire you for insubordination. Probably, Amara agreed, but someone has to keep fighting. Maya and Bethany are still here, still in danger. I can't abandon them. After a heated debate, Darius and Keisha reluctantly departed with most of their equipment and evidence backups. Amara checked into a different hotel under a false name, preparing to continue alone. Her determination would be tested sooner than expected. That afternoon, while meeting with Maya at a quiet diner outside town, Amara noticed 2 police cruisers pulling into the parking lot. We've got company, she warned quietly. Is there a back exit? Before Maya could answer, 4 officers entered and headed straight for their booth. Amara Cole, the lead officer asked. You need to come with us. On what charge? Amara demanded, already knowing this was Whitfield's next move. Evidence tampering and witness intimidation, he replied, producing handcuffs. Judge Whitfield issued the warrant himself this morning. Despite her protests, Amara was handcuffed and driven to the Millbrook County Jail. During processing, her phone and identification were confiscated. When she demanded her phone call, the booking officer smiled unpleasantly. Systems down, maybe tomorrow. She was placed in a cell in the women's wing, isolated from other inmates. Hours passed with no formal charges filed, no phone call granted, no attorney provided. As night fell, Amara realized the gravity of her situation. She was completely cut off from the outside world, held in a facility controlled by Whitfield's allies. Her worst fears were confirmed when Sheriff Calloway appeared outside her cell around midnight. Comfortable, Miss Cole? I hope not. He chuckled. Judge Whitfield wanted me to personally inform you that your federal credentials don't mean much. Here, you've been officially suspended pending an internal investigation. Washington has washed their hands of you. I want my phone call, Amara insisted, and I want the charges formally presented in court. All in good time, Calloway replied. Though I should warn you, inmates here have been known to get rowdy, especially when they learn someone's been investigating their families. Might be dangerous for a federal agent in general population. The threat was unmistakable. Before leaving, Calloway added casually, "Oh, and Director Harrison called, said something about your history of mental health issues and questionable conduct. Apparently this isn't the first time you've gone rogue on an investigation. Poor judgment, he called it. Obsessive behavior." The lies stung, but Amara recognized the strategy. They were building a narrative to discredit her, even if she managed to get word out about her situation. That night, her cell door opened around 2 a.m. 2 male guards entered. "Random inspection," one announced, though both wore no name badges. "Stand against the wall." Amara complied but remained vigilant. When one guard moved to grab her arm, she reacted instinctively, using her federal training to deflect his grip. The other guard immediately swung his baton, catching her shoulder. A brief struggle ensued, ending with Amara subdued but not before. She landed several defensive strikes. Both guards departed, promising to write her up for assaulting corrections officers. Alone again, Amara assessed her injuries: a split lip, bruised shoulder, and possibly a cracked rib. She tried to Document the assault mentally, knowing physical evidence would mysteriously disappear in this jail. A small mercy arrived the next morning, in the form of a female guard named Tanya, who slipped her antiseptic wipes during breakfast delivery. "This isn't right," Tanya whispered. "I heard what happened last night." "I need to get word out," Amara whispered back. "They're keeping me isolated illegally." Tanya hesitated, then nodded slightly. "I'll see what I can do." True to her word, Tanya returned during her evening shift with a contraband cell phone hidden in Amara's meal tray. "5 minutes," she warned. "Then I have to take it back. They don't monitor the cameras in this section between shift changes, but we've only got a small window." Amara quickly called Darius, who answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" "We've been going crazy trying to find you." "Millbrook County Jail," she replied rapidly. "No formal charges, no phone call, no attorney. Whitfield is burying me. I need help." "Director Chen is already involved," Darius assured her. "Harrison's been temporarily removed pending investigation. We found the connection. Harrison's son works for Senator Preston's campaign." "Listen carefully," Amara continued, aware of her limited time. "Document my illegal detention, file emergency motions in federal court, and check on Maya Jenkins. She was with me when I was arrested." After ending the call, Amara returned the phone to Tanya with heartfelt thanks. Her hope was short-lived. The next morning, Judge Whitfield himself appeared at her cell, impeccable in his judicial robes. "Good news, Miss Cole. We're transferring you to a more appropriate facility. The State Correctional Center in Montgomery has agreed to hold you pending your hearing." Amara immediately recognized the danger. "On whose authority? I haven't even been formally charged or arraigned." "Details," Whitfield waved dismissively. "The paperwork will catch up. Meanwhile, I've determined you're a flight risk and potentially dangerous to yourself and others. The transfer happens tonight, for your own protection, of course." The implication was clear. Once transferred to the state facility, Amara would effectively disappear into the system. Any accident that happened there would be far from Millbrook and easily covered up. As Whitfield turned to leave, he added with chilling finality, "Your father didn't understand the natural order of things. In Millbrook either. Some lessons, it seems, must be taught twice to a family." The transport van's steel floor vibrated beneath Amara as it traveled the dark highway toward Montgomery State Correctional Facility. Her wrists chafed against two tight handcuffs, a final petty cruelty from Sheriff Calloway before departure. 2 deputies sat in front, largely ignoring their sole passenger. Through the small mesh-covered window, Amara watched the familiar landmarks of Millbrook County give way to open countryside. Each mile increased the distance between her and any hope of justice. Then abruptly red and blue lights flashed in the darkness behind them. The van slowed. "What the hell?" muttered the deputy driving. "That's not one of ours." Several more vehicles appeared, boxing in the transport van from all sides. "Pull over," instructed a voice through a loudspeaker. "Federal agents, stop your vehicle immediately." The deputies exchanged panicked glances before complying. What happened next unfolded with military precision. The van doors were opened by agents in FBI windbreakers, weapons drawn. A tall black woman in an impeccable suit approached. "I'm Director Victoria Chen, Justice Department Civil Rights Division. Those restraints on Investigator Cole need to come off now." The deputies scrambled to comply as Director Chen helped Amara from the van. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly. "I've been better," Amara admitted, rubbing her wrists. "How did you find me?" "Your team never stopped fighting for you. When you disappeared from official custody without processing, Darius and Keisha went straight to my office with everything you'd gathered. I brought in the FBI Civil Rights Unit and got emergency orders signed by a federal judge." In the warmth of a bureau SUV, Amara received medical attention for her injuries, while Director Chen explained the rapidly evolving situation. The story broke nationally this morning. A consortium of civil rights organizations has been organizing protests outside the Millbrook courthouse since dawn, hundreds of people showing up with signs saying, "Justice for Amara" and "Black Lives Matter in Millbrook." Chen handed Amara her phone, showing footage of a diverse crowd filling the courthouse. Steps, their chants audible even through the small speaker. How did they know? Amara asked, astonished. Keisha leaked selected evidence to Jordan Reynolds at the National Herald, Chen explained. Not enough to compromise our case, but enough to show a pattern of racial discrimination and your unlawful detention. Reynolds has sources deep in Washington. Once he started asking questions, several Justice Department officials began distancing themselves from Harrison and Senator Preston. The political landscape had shifted dramatically in just 24 hours. With national attention focused on Millbrook, previously silent officials were suddenly eager to demonstrate their commitment to justice. A Congressional Oversight Committee had announced emergency hearings into judicial corruption and civil rights violations in federal courts. Harrison has been suspended pending investigation, Chen continued, and I've been named acting director of the task force with expanded authority. You've been officially reinstated with full credentials. She handed Amara a new Justice Department badge and service weapon. We're moving fast now. Federal agents have secured the courthouse and records office. Judge Whitfield has been served with a subpoena to appear before a grand jury in Birmingham tomorrow. For the first time in days, Amara allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. They established a command center at the Birmingham Federal Building, 40 miles from Millbrook, but safely outside Whitfield's sphere of influence. There, Amara reunited with Darius and Keisha, who had been working around the clock to organize the evidence. Maya Jenkins is safe, Darius assured her. We got her out of Millbrook the minute we heard about your arrest. She's under federal protection and providing a full statement. And Bethany Collins was released this morning on orders from the federal court, Keisha added. All charges against her were dismissed. The team worked through the night, preparing for the grand jury presentation. Morning brought news that Judge Whitfield had been served with his subpoena at his country club, the humiliation of being approached in front of his peers, a small but satisfying victory. Hours later, however, an urgent alert came in. Whitfield's private plane filed a flight plan for Cancun. An FBI agent reported. He's trying to flee jurisdiction. Amara and Director Chen immediately dispatched agents to the private airfield outside Millbrook. They arrived just as Whitfield was boarding his Cessna, luggage in hand. The look of shock on his face as federal agents surrounded him became a photograph that would appear on newspaper front pages across the country. With Whitfield in custody, the case accelerated. The grand jury convened, hearing testimony from dozens of witnesses, including Maya, Bethany, and numerous victims of Whitfield's biased rulings. Evidence poured in as people throughout Millbrook County finally felt safe coming forward. The investigation expanded to include Sheriff Calloway, District Attorney Reynolds, and 3 county commissioners, all part of Whitfield's corruption network. Victory seemed within reach until Amara received a disturbing late-night call on her secure line. He'd rather see you dead than testify, said an anonymous voice before disconnecting. Tracing the call proved impossible, but the threat was taken seriously. Amara's security detail was doubled, and all team members received additional protection. The warning proved prescient when digital forensics discovered a contract had been placed on Amara through an encrypted messaging platform associated with a private security firm owned by Whitfield's former law partner. FBI analysts were working to identify the hired assassin, but the threat remained active and credible. That evening, as the team prepared for the next day's proceedings, Director Chen took Amara aside. We've come too far to lose now, she said solemnly. I need to know if there's anything in your personal connection to this case that could compromise our position. Anything Whitfield's lawyers could use to claim bias or vendetta. Amara hesitated, then made her decision. My father's case needs to be part of the record, she said firmly. Not hidden, not minimized. His story deserves to be told alongside all the others. Whitfield stole his freedom, his property, and ultimately his life through a deliberately rigged system. That's not bias. That's the heart of this entire case. Chen nodded slowly. Then we tell it all. Every victim, every abuse of power, every racial injustice, including your father's. No more shadows for Judge Whitfield to hide in. The tide had turned. The power structure that had protected Whitfield for decades was crumbling as more officials rushed to cooperate, hoping to secure leniency. Senator Preston issued a statement expressing concern about the allegations and claiming minimal contact with his brother-in-law's judicial practices. The mayor of Millbrook announced a comprehensive review of all city contracts with developers implicated in the bribery scheme. Only Judge Whitfield remained defiant, refusing to resign and insisting he would be vindicated. As Amara prepared for bed in her secure hotel room, she gazed out at the Birmingham skyline. For the first time since arriving in Alabama, she allowed herself to imagine justice, not just for her father, but for an entire community that had suffered under Whitfield's corrupted authority. "We're almost there, Dad," she whispered too. "The night sky. Do you believe the justice system treats everyone equally regardless of race? Comment number 1 if you think systemic racism still exists in our courts, or number 2 if you believe justice is truly blind. Hit that like button if you felt satisfaction seeing Judge Whitfield finally face consequences for his actions. Subscribe to follow Amara's dangerous journey as she fights to dismantle decades of corruption. How far will Whitfield's allies go to silence her permanently? Do you think Amara should have revealed her personal connection to the case earlier, or was she right to keep it private until now? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Birmingham Federal Building gleamed in the morning sunlight as Amara arrived with her security detail. 2 stone-faced FBI agents who had become her constant companions since the death threat. Inside, the investigation headquarters buzzed with activity. Federal agents, analysts, and prosecutors worked in coordinated precision, building what Director Chen called the most airtight case of judicial corruption in department history. Amara's new status as both investigator and potential target had necessitated unprecedented security measures. She now wore a lightweight, bulletproof vest beneath her suit jacket. Her movements between buildings followed unpredictable routes and schedules. Her hotel room changed nightly. The security felt suffocating but necessary, especially after what happened to their first witness that morning. "Trevor Williams just recanted his entire testimony," Darius announced grimly as Amara entered the conference room. "Claims he misremembered the conversations with Judge Whitfield about his brother's sentencing." "Williams was rock solid yesterday," Amara replied, confusion evident in her voice. "What changed?" Keisha slid a police report across the table. "His auto repair shop was vandalized last night. Windows smashed, equipment destroyed. Message spray-painted on the wall, 'Lying niggers burn.'" "Jesus," Amara breathed. "And the local police response?" "Incident report says probable insurance fraud and no suspects identified," Keisha replied, disgust evident in her tone. Sheriff Calloway's deputies responded. Trevor Williams wasn't alone. Throughout the day, reports filtered in of witnesses facing sudden, targeted harassment. A black-owned bakery that had provided documents about Whitfield's zoning manipulation received surprise health code violations. A teacher who had testified about her wrongful conviction found her car tires slashed in the school parking lot. The landlord of an apartment building housing 3 witness families abruptly doubled their rent, citing market adjustments. This intimidation campaign extended beyond Millbrook. Amara received a call from her mother in Atlanta. "Someone spray-painted our house last night," she reported, her voice shaking despite her attempt at calm. "Horrible things, Amara. Racial slurs, threats. The police came, but you know how these things go." Amara immediately arranged for FBI protection for her mother, guilt gnawing at her for dragging her family back into Whitfield's orbit. That afternoon, the prosecution team faced another setback. A coordinated social media campaign had launched overnight, painting Amara as mentally unstable and obsessed with pursuing personal vendettas against respected Southern institutions. Director Chen showed Amara the trending hashtag #CoalConspiracy, which featured manipulated photos and false claims about her professional conduct. "They're trying to poison the jury pool," Chen explained, "and undermine your credibility as a witness." Most disturbing was the level of personal detail in these attacks. Information about Amara's college years, previous cases, even her therapy sessions following her father's death. Details that could only come from internal Justice Department personnel fields. "The leak goes deeper than we thought," Amara realized. "They still have someone inside with high-level access." As if confirming her fears, that evening brought news of a suspicious fire at the Birmingham evidence storage facility where duplicates of their digital records were kept. While the primary evidence remained secure on encrypted servers, the attack demonstrated the reach and desperation of Whitfield's network. "They're getting bolder," Director Chen observed during their emergency security meeting, "which means they're getting more desperate. We need to accelerate the case before they can do more damage." The grand jury was scheduled to vote on indictments in 3 days. Until then, security protocols would be tightened further. Amara would be moved to a safe house outside Birmingham, her location known only to Director Chen and the head of her security detail. The transfer to the safe house took place at midnight, using 3 identical black SUVs, leaving the hotel simultaneously in different directions, a standard FBI convoy decoy technique. Amara rode in the middle vehicle, sandwiched between her security agents, her hand resting near her service weapon. They were halfway to the safe house, traveling along a wooded county road when it happened. A tree trunk suddenly appeared in the roadway. Their driver swerved hard, bringing the SUV to a screeching halt. Before they could reverse, high-intensity lights blinded them from both sides of the road. Gunfire erupted, shattering the passenger window. "Ambush!" shouted the agent beside Amara, pushing her down as he returned fire. What followed was a chaotic blur of shouting, gunshots, and movement. Amara's training kicked in. She drew her weapon and fired toward the lights while her security team established a defensive perimeter around the vehicle. One agent took a bullet to the shoulder, but continued returning fire. After what seemed like hours, but was likely only minutes, additional headlights appeared. The trailing FBI vehicle had circled back. The attackers melted into the woods as reinforcements arrived. In the aftermath, Amara surveyed the damage with shaking hands. Their SUV was riddled with bullets. One agent required hospitalization, but would survive. The attackers had left no evidence beyond shell casings that would likely prove untraceable. "They knew our route," the lead security agent concluded grimly. "This wasn't random. Someone leaked the safe house location and transfer plan." The operation had been compromised at the highest level. Director Chen made an immediate decision. Amara would be relocated to an FBI field office in another state. The transfer would be arranged directly through the FBI director, with no details shared through Justice Department channels. As dawn broke, Amara found herself in a secure room at the Atlanta field office, hundreds of miles from Millbrook, but still connected to the investigation via encrypted video links. During that morning's strategy session, tech specialists delivered more troubling news. "We found sophisticated tracking software installed on the task force's devices," the lead analyst explained. "Military-grade stuff that captures keystrokes, activates microphones, and tracks locations. It required direct, physical access to install." "When could that have happened?" Director Chen demanded. "Most likely during the evidence consolidation at the Birmingham Federal Building," the analyst replied. "Someone with Justice Department credentials and building access could have done it in minutes." The implications were chilling. Someone with federal credentials was actively sabotaging their investigation and endangering lives. The list of people with the necessary access and technical capability was short and troubling. As the team began checking each device for compromise, Amara participated via secure video link from Atlanta. She was reviewing witness testimony when movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. In the reflective glass of the office, window behind her, she glimpsed a shadow moving in the hallway outside her secured room, a figure raising what appeared to be a weapon. Amara dove from her chair as the window shattered. Gunfire peppered the wall where she had been sitting seconds before. She crawled behind a heavy filing cabinet, drawing her weapon. Over the secure line still active on her laptop, she could hear the team in Birmingham shouting in alarm, having witnessed the attack in real time. "Shooter in the Atlanta office," she managed to communicate before disconnecting to focus on survival. Outside her room, she could hear shouts and more gunfire as FBI agents responded to the breach. The office door splintered as bullets tore her through it. Amara calculated her options, controlled her breathing, and waited. When the firing paused, likely for a reload, she made her move. firing 3 precise shots through the damaged door at waist height. A grunt of pain told her at least one shot had connected. Moments later, the hallway flooded with FBI tactical personnel. The shooter, wounded but alive, was secured. The attack had lasted less than 2 minutes, but changed everything. The would-be assassin was identified as former military, now employed by the same private security firm connected to Whitfield's former law partner. More significantly, he had entered the secure FBI facility using legitimate credentials stolen from a Justice Department liaison. The breach confirmed their worst fears. Whitfield's corruption network extended into federal law enforcement itself. No location could be considered truly secure. As medical personnel treated a graze wound on Amara's arm, Director Chen made a decisive announcement over their secure channel. "We end this now. Grand jury reconvenes tomorrow morning. Full presentation of all evidence. No more delays." The grand jury room in the Birmingham Federal Courthouse hummed with tension as 23 citizens prepared to hear the culmination of the case against Judge Robert Whitfield and his associates. Security measures were unprecedented. The building had been swept for explosives twice before dawn. Snipers positioned on adjacent rooftops, and all personnel entering the secure floor underwent multiple identification checks. Amara sat in the witness preparation room, reviewing her testimony one final time. Her arm throbbed beneath its bandage, a physical reminder of how close she had come to becoming another statistic in Whitfield's long history of silenced opponents. Director Chen entered, her normally composed features showing signs of the sleepless nights that had become routine. "We've got a development," she announced without preamble. "The FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force has taken over security. They've upgraded this from a corruption case to domestic terrorism based on the coordinated attacks on federal personnel." The classification escalation meant more resources and higher penalties for those involved, a significant victory. "Any word on our mystery insider?" Amara asked. Chen nodded grimly. "Special Agent Lawrence Collins, 23 years with the Bureau, last 12 assigned as liaison to Senator Preston's Judiciary Committee. They found offshore accounts matching the pattern of deposits we traced from Whitfield's network. He's in custody, cooperating to save himself." The pieces were falling into place. With Collins's cooperation, they had identified the entire structure of Whitfield's operation, the judges, police officers, prosecutors, and politicians who had enabled and profited from decades of racial discrimination and corruption. The B1 grand jury would hear it all. Amara was scheduled as the final witness, tasked with connecting all elements of the conspiracy. As she walked to the grand jury room, protected by 4 agents, she felt the weight of responsibility, not just for the case, but for every person who had suffered under Whitfield's corrupted authority. For the next 3 hours, she presented a comprehensive account of the investigation's findings. She detailed the statistical evidence showing the extreme racial disparities in sentencing. She explained the financial trails connecting case outcomes to mysterious offshore deposits. She played recordings of Whitfield and his associates discussing their neighborhood preservation initiative and strategies for keeping black residents from encroaching on certain areas of Millbrook. Throughout her testimony, Amara maintained professional detachment until she reached her father's case. Marcus Cole was arrested in 2004 for an armed robbery at Millbrook Community Bank, she explained, her voice steady despite the personal pain. He was a math teacher at Millbrook High School with no criminal record. The only evidence against him was a witness identification by the bank manager, a golfing partner of Judge Whitfield. She displayed documents recovered from Whitfield's hidden safe. "These are Judge Whitfield's private notes on the case. They show he knew the real perpetrator was likely Tyler Henderson, the nephew of Sheriff Calloway at that time, but he proceeded with my father's case anyway." The grand jurors leaned forward as Amara revealed the most damning evidence. 3 years later, Tyler Henderson was arrested in Georgia for another robbery. He confessed to the Millbrook Bank robbery and specifically stated that Marcus Cole was innocent. Judge Whitfield received this confession, but sealed it and denied the appeal without review. A murmur ran through the grand jury as Amara continued. My father died in prison from pneumonia that went untreated. After his conviction, his property, 3 acres adjacent to what is now the Riverview development, was seized through civil forfeiture. That property was purchased at auction by Whitfield's brother-in-law for 1/10 its market value, then resold to developer Bradley Wilson, once rezoning was approved by Whitfield's court. The human cost of Whitfield's corruption was undeniable. When she concluded her testimony, several grand jurors were openly weeping. Outside the courthouse, the story had captured national attention. Hundreds of protesters gathered daily, demanding justice for Whitfield's victims. Civil rights organizations had established a legal clinic to review cases handled by Whitfield and his associates, already identifying over 200 potentially wrongful convictions. Back at the command center, Amara and the team monitored developments as the grand jury deliberated. The wait was shorter than expected. By late afternoon, they received word. Indictments had been returned against Judge Robert Whitfield, Sheriff Thomas Calloway, District Attorney Thomas Reynolds, County Commissioner William Franklin, and 4 other officials. The charges included racketeering, civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, and in Whitfield's case, additional charges related to the attempted murder of a federal officer. Federal agents moved immediately to make arrests. Most subjects surrendered without incident, but Judge Whitfield had other ideas. When agents arrived at the courthouse to take him into custody, they found he had barricaded himself in his chambers with several armed supporters, including private security contractors and 2 loyal deputies. He's claiming federal overreach and threatening armed resistance, reported the FBI tactical commander. Says he'll only surrender to state authorities, not federal agents. A tense standoff ensued. The courthouse was evacuated and surrounded. Negotiators attempted to establish communication, while tactical teams positioned for potential breach. Director Chen and Amara monitored the situation from the command center. He's trying to make himself a martyr, Chen observed, playing to his base about federal tyranny and states' rights. He's also buying time, Amara added. Every minute he's barricaded is another minute his associates have to destroy evidence. After 4 hours of failed negotiations, Director Chen authorized a new approach. She asked Amara to record a direct message to Whitfield. Judge Whitfield, Amara stated into the camera, her voice firm and clear. This is federal investigator Amara Cole. I understand your concerns about federal authority. I'm authorized to offer you the opportunity to surrender to a joint federal-state task force with full media presence to ensure transparency in your processing. Your supporters will be granted safe passage if they disarm immediately. The strategic compromise worked. Unwilling to risk a violent confrontation that would damage his public image, Whitfield agreed to the terms. At sunset, he emerged from the courthouse with his hands raised, walking directly toward the assembled news cameras. The footage of Judge Robert Whitfield, still in his judicial robes, being handcuffed and placed in a federal vehicle, became an iconic image in the ongoing national conversation about race and justice. During his arrest processing, agents discovered additional evidence in Whitfield's briefcase, a handwritten list of grand jurors' addresses, confirming he had been planning witness intimidation until the very end. That night, as the team celebrated their hard-won victory, Amara received a strange phone call from an untraceable number. "Check the judge's insulin," said a female voice before disconnecting. Amara recognized the voice. Catherine Whitfield, the judge's wife, who had confronted her at the gala. Why would she call with such a cryptic message, and why now after her husband's arrest? Amara immediately alerted the federal detention center where Whitfield was being held. Investigators discovered that his insulin vial had been tampered with, containing 10 times the normal concentration, enough to cause a fatal overdose. Whether it was meant as a suicide method or an assassination attempt remained unclear. But Catherine Whitfield had vanished from Millbrook, her whereabouts unknown. The preliminary hearing for United States versus Whitfield was delayed by 48 hours due to the defendant's medical emergency. Judge Robert Whitfield had been transported to University Hospital after detention center medical staff discovered the tampered insulin. Whether he had planned suicide to escape justice or someone had attempted to silence him permanently remained under investigation. The insulin overdose had been caught before administration, but the incident added yet another layer of intrigue to a case already making legal history. Amara watched from the prosecution table as Whitfield was finally brought into the federal courtroom. The once imposing figure appeared diminished in his orange jumpsuit, his silver hair disheveled, his confident swagger replaced by shuffling steps. Federal prosecutors had assembled an overwhelming case. Forensic accountants had traced $3.2 million in bribes through a labyrinth of shell companies and offshore accounts. Digital evidence recovered from Whitfield's devices revealed communications coordinating the systematic discrimination against black defendants and manipulation of court procedures. Most damning were the testimonies from over 30 former defendants, each describing how Whitfield's courtroom had functioned as a pipeline sending black citizens to prison while white defendants received leniency for identical crimes. As the IT's hearing proceeded, the full scope of Whitfield's corruption network emerged. 3 county judges, 6 police officials, 4 prosecutors, and numerous business leaders had participated in what prosecutors termed a criminal enterprise designed to maintain racial hierarchies through abuse of judicial authority. The conspiracy had extended across 3 counties, affecting thousands of cases over more than 2 decades. The human cost was staggering: families separated, careers destroyed, lives lost in prison for crimes that white defendants had received probation for. Communities gutted by mass incarceration, generational wealth stripped through excessive fines and property seizures. Behind the statistical evidence were real people whose lives had been irreparably damaged by Whitfield's bigotry and greed. The Department of Justice announced a comprehensive review of all cases handled by the implicated officials. A special task force would prioritize cases where defendants remained incarcerated, working to identify wrongful convictions and expedite releases. For those already released, record expungement and compensation processes would be established. Community healing began cautiously. Town hall meetings brought together victims, advocates, and officials to discuss systemic reforms. Federal mediators facilitated difficult conversations about race, justice, and reconciliation. Churches and civic organizations established support systems for returning citizens and affected families. For Amara, the most personally significant development came midway through the proceedings. The federal court officially vacated Marcus Cole's conviction posthumously, acknowledging the grave miscarriage of justice in his case. Her father's name was finally cleared 20 years after his wrongful conviction. The property that had been seized from him, now worth millions as part of Millbrook's downtown development, could not be returned, but substantial financial compensation would be awarded to his estate. The acknowledgement of the wrong done to her father brought Amara a measure of peace she had not expected to find. "He would be proud of you," Director Chen told her privately after the ruling, not just for clearing his name, but for helping so many others. As the case progressed through the federal courts, systemic changes rippled outward. Several states adopted new judicial oversight measures modeled on recommendations from the Whitfield case. Mandatory data collection on sentencing disparities, anonymous reporting systems for judicial misconduct, and enhanced transparency requirements for judicial financial disclosures became legislative priorities. The Justice Department established a new Judicial Integrity Task Force focused on identifying and addressing similar patterns of corruption and discrimination in other jurisdictions. Amara was offered leadership of this initiative, a role that would allow her to transform her personal mission into institutional change. On the final day of proceedings, Amara entered Judge Whitfield's former courtroom, now presided over by a federal judge for sentencing. As special prosecutor appointed to represent the victims, she would address the court regarding the impact of Whitfield's crimes. She took her position at the podium, facing the man who had caused so much suffering. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and steady, "the United States requests that the defendant be sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, the average excessive sentence he imposed on black defendants compared to white defendants. for identical crimes over his judicial career. She detailed the pattern of abuse, the lives destroyed, the communities damaged. She spoke of her father, and of all the other fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters who had lost years of their lives to Whitfield's hatred and corruption. When she finished, the courtroom sat in profound silence. Judge Robert Whitfield, given the opportunity to address the court before sentencing, rose slowly to his feet. For a moment, Amara thought he might finally acknowledge his crimes, offer some expression of remorse. Instead, he straightened his shoulders and declared, "I served Millbrook according to its traditions and values. History will vindicate me." The federal judge was unmoved by Whitfield's defiance. "Robert Whitfield, you have betrayed your oath, your office, and the fundamental principles of equal justice. You have caused incalculable harm to countless individuals and to the very fabric of the communities you were sworn to serve. You have shown no remorse and no recognition of the gravity of your crimes." The sentence was delivered without hesitation: 25 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole, and forfeiture of all ill-gotten assets. As Whitfield was led away in handcuffs, Amara felt no triumph, only a solemn sense that a measure of justice had finally been achieved. 1 month later, Amara stood before a classroom of aspiring prosecutors at the Justice Department training facility. These young lawyers, diverse in background but united in purpose, represented the future of federal civil rights enforcement. "The scales of justice are not self-balancing," she told them, sharing lessons from the Whitfield case. "They require vigilant guardians willing to recognize when the system itself becomes corrupted. Your job is not merely to win cases, but to ensure that justice truly is blind to color, to wealth, to power and privilege." In the years that followed, Amara's Judicial Integrity Task Force identified similar patterns of discrimination in courtrooms across the country. Each investigation brought accountability. Each reform strengthened the foundations of equal justice. The legacy of the Whitfield case extended far beyond Millbrook, Alabama, becoming a landmark in the ongoing struggle to fulfill America's promise of justice for all. In Millbrook itself, the courthouse where Judge Whitfield had reigned now featured a public exhibition documenting the case and honoring those who had fought for justice. Marcus Cole's photograph held a prominent place among those who had suffered and those who had persevered. Beside it was inscribed the phrase that had become Amara's guiding principle: "Justice delayed is justice denied, but justice pursued is hope sustained." What would you do if you witnessed corruption in your local justice system? Comment below with your thoughts on how ordinary citizens can help ensure equal justice. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe to support more content that shines a light on important social issues. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the ongoing fight for racial justice in America's courts. Thank you for joining me on this powerful journey through the scales of justice. Remember that each of us has the power to tip those scales toward fairness and equality for all. Amara Cole's journey reveals powerful truths about justice and institutional change. First, systems designed to protect can become weapons of oppression when corrupted by prejudice and greed. Judge Whitfield's courtroom demonstrated how racism can hide behind the veneer of legal authority, creating two separate systems of justice based on skin color. Second, true change requires both moral courage and strategic patience. Amara didn't just fight with righteous anger. She built an airtight case that couldn't be dismissed or buried. Justice work demands evidence, allies, and persistence in the face of intimidation. Third, corruption thrives in silence and isolation. When Amara broke the wall of fear that protected Whitfield's network, others found courage to speak their truths. A single voice can catalyze a chorus that cannot be silenced. Fourth, personal wounds can become sources of strength. Amara's pain from her father's wrongful conviction fueled her determination without consuming her professionalism. She transformed private grief into public good. Finally, justice isn't merely punishing wrongdoers, it's restoring dignity to victims, reforming broken systems, and creating safeguards against future abuses. The most meaningful victory wasn't Whitfield's imprisonment, but the thousands of cases reviewed, the families reunited, and the new oversight measures ensuring equality before the law. True justice requires constant vigilance. The scales don't balance themselves. What moments in your own life have you witnessed injustice but felt powerless to stop it? Have you ever been treated differently because of your race, background, or appearance? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story matters and could inspire others to speak up. If Amara's determination to fight corruption resonated with you, hit that like button to help this story reach others who need to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives about ordinary heroes standing up against systemic injustice. And please share this video with someone who might be losing faith in the possibility of change. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in the struggle is the encouragement we need to keep fighting. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the scales of justice. Remember, in a world where corruption often seems untouchable, your voice, your vote, and your courage can still tip the scales toward equality.